Have you heard about space tornadoes? You'll want to, trust me. Space tornadoes are so cool. There was one in quadrant 714 about a million years ago. Actually, about 100 million years ago. It's even longer than I thought. In quadrant 714, which is extremely, infinitely on the other side of the universe, millions of light years away. Well, how did we see it? Well, we've always had telescopes. Even that long ago, there were people on Earth that had telescopes. They've always been astronomers, boy, people who study the skies and the stars and space. They're always watching, boy. They're always watching to see what goes on out there. Anyways, they saw this one happening all this long time ago. And we have writings about it from the ancient Mayans and the ancient Chinese astronomers that lived back then. So what is a space tornado? Well, if you ever get the chance to see one, you're going to want to see it. I mean, right now we can only see them with telescopes. So, anyways, if you ever had the chance to travel and actually witness one, well, you'd need a pretty amazing spaceship to get there, but someday it might be possible. So, but right now we can only use telescopes. Because quite frankly, there's never been one close to our solar system in our galaxy. And they're so big and so catastrophic is almost the right word. But they're not really catastrophic. They seem catastrophic at first. Kind of like some events in our lives. But what happens at the end of them, basically what God does with them, makes them not catastrophic. It makes them rebirthing and gives new life to us. So let me tell you how it happens. It starts with gravity. Gravity is a force that God made to, well, I don't know its purpose except here on Earth. On Earth, it holds us onto the planet, right? So we don't fly off into space. It's a very interesting force. But it affects almost all matter in the universe, right? So all matter has some gravity, which means it pulls things towards it, right? And the bigger the object, the larger the object in space or in the universe, the more gravity it has. So this is how a space tornado got started. There was a ultra big neutron star, which are the biggest massivest. That's not a word, I just made that up, but it just means big, like the biggest neutron star ever. Look up neutron stars sometime and see how big they are. So it had gravity, and what happened is it got old after several million years, and it burned out, right? Because that's what happens to stars. They eventually use all of their fuel, and they burn out, and then they shrink. But as with all things, when they burn, there's some elements left over. So when we have a fire on Earth, there's ash and there's smoke, right? So there's a little bit of the elements that actually don't get burned up. So this happens in stars too. So this ultra mega huge neutron star finally burned up after millions of years. And what was left, because it was so big, the gravity just sucked it in on itself towards the core of what was left of that star. And when it came in so fast, after all those years and years and years of just sucking in gravity, it hit so hard, and you have to understand that neutron stars are so big that they can do that. They can take years for all this matter to just collapse in on itself, even though it's happening fast, right? Because they're so big, they're like bigger than our whole solar system and just gigantic. So all this matter came together, and it just collapsed in on itself, and it crushed in on itself. And what happened is it started to spin. Because a little bit of it was just off center, enough on this side and enough on this side that it started to spin. Faster and faster and faster and faster. And let me tell you, when things go fast in outer space, they go fast. It's nothing like what happens here on Earth. Here on Earth, we think things go fast, but things in outer space on the other side of the universe, they go zillions of times faster, quintillions of times faster, to use our favorite word. And so this thing starts spinning and spinning and spinning. So gravity started it all right. And it picked up momentum. Now, when things pick up momentum, they just keep going and going and going and going and going. And what happened is that momentum started to create a space wind. And a space wind is not like wind on Earth, because wind on Earth deals with air, right? The air around us. And we feel the air moving because of atmospheric changes and pressure changes and things like that. And we feel the wind going. But the wind in space, there's no air, right? So it has to be made out of other things. It has to use other things. So what it uses is it uses energy. Like electronic energy and light energy and heat energy. But that energy also collects with it matter. It collects dust and gases and electrons and protons and neutrons. And whatever matter it can find, which includes stars and planets and light and meteors and comets and nebulas, anything you can find out there in outer space, right? They don't even know everything that's out there, but this is some of the things that we know. So it gathers all these things together, and this wind starts swirling around this gigantic neutron star. That's how space tornadoes get started, right? So they just get going, and it starts sucking in all this stuff around it. And it turns into this vortex, this spinning vortex, just like a tornado on the Earth, that sucks everything into it. And it starts moving through space. And when it starts moving, boy, it starts sucking in everything in its path. It just starts sucking in things. And the whole time, when it's sucking all this matter in from all of these space objects around it, well, it gets what? It gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And this one, this particular one that I'm talking about that happened all these 100 million years ago in quadrant 714 on the other side of the universe, it got so big that God was even a little amazed. He's like, wow. He's like, well, this thing is bigger than even I anticipated, right? And so he calls his friends over. He's like, hey, look at this thing. This is pretty cool. You got to see this. And so everybody was watching it. And the astronomers on our planet, the ancient Mayans and the Chinese, they were watching it too. Boy, I mean, they had all their friends gathered around. Look, look, look. And so it got so big that, I mean, it had already sucked in, it started sucking in planets. It had already sucked in meteorites and asteroids and some comets, and it started sucking in planets, and exoplanets, and it got so big that it actually started to suck in some stars, believe it or not, like some stars. And when a space tornado gets so big that it starts to suck in a star, well, do you know how much energy and matter and heat and pressure is in a star? There's so much matter in a star and so much heat that it just adds to the space tornado, and the space tornado just becomes infinitely huge and massive. And, well, it just keeps going and going. So God and all his friends are just sitting up there going, ah, look at this thing going. And it got so big, right? So it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and spinning and spinning and spinning and moving faster through space. And pretty soon, believe it or not, it got so big, it started to suck nebulas into it. And nebulas are like the birthplaces of stars, right? Where there's millions and billions of stars being created inside nebulas. So when the space tornado gets so big that it starts sucking in the creation centers of stars themselves, and all those gases and all that heat and all that electricity and all that light and all that energy, and it just gets beyond massively huge, right? It's just so big. It basically started to consume that whole quadrant of space, and it got so big that, believe it or not, it even started to suck in some galaxies. I mean, entire galaxies that are just filled with millions of stars, right? And billions of stars. It just started to suck them in, and they're usually shaped, right, like a big spiral. and they would even change their shape. Their shape would change, and it would just get sucked in, and just all of the energy, all of the billions of stars, all of the solar systems, the comets, the exoplanets, everything that was inside the white dwarfs of the old star, everything that was inside of these galaxies just became part of this mega huge, ultra massive space tornado that was just collecting everything in this quadrant of space inside of it and swirling faster and faster and faster. Don't you know? Don't you know that God has a plan? Here's what it is. And this is sometimes what happens in our lives too. He knew that everything in that section of space was getting kind of old and it needed to be recycled. And so he was actually, it's part of his plan, right? All things are part of his plan. So it started to take all this old material and it got it moving so fast and so together into a concentrated area, and the energy inside of it became so strong that it all came together and it all hit each other at a force so hard it ran into all of it ran into each other. It just kaboom in a giant ultra massive energy joining collision. Boom! Everything in that entire quadrant of the universe just slammed into each other so hard, so mega hard, and the energy and the heat was so intense and so powerful and so strong that it just, all the matter changed form, changed into brand new energy and brand new light and brand new stars, really. All that energy and all that heat and all that light formed brand new beautiful stars, billions and billions and billions and zillions and quintillions of stars. And all the old matter turned into new matter, and it was all glowing brilliantly light and alive with new colors and new energy and newness, new radiance that just shot out in every direction. From that quadrant of space, it filled that quadrant of the universe and just shot out into all the entire universe, into every quadrant of the universe, every corner, every place in the universe. Brand new, beautiful, multicolored stars with new colors and new energy and new light that had never even existed before. And God just went, that's how I do it. And it made, that's what God does in our lives sometimes too. He takes things that are old that we've been through, and they just worn out. We don't use them anymore. We just don't need them anymore. And he takes them and he puts them through a process and he turns it into something new, something beautiful that creates new light and new life and new beauty for us and for everyone around us. I love you a lot. Jesus loves you way more than I do.